Hi, you guys. Let's talk about simplifying fractions today. And I want to say thank you so much to everybody watching these movies on YouTube. We're almost at 1,800 views, so thank you very much. All right, take a look at fractions. A fraction is just where we have one number over another number. And it's where a and b are integers. That means they're whole complete numbers or they're opposites. And the bottom, remember, the b, can never be 0. Okay, simplest form is when we reduce. So for example, if I had 10 over 15, I would divide the 10 by 5 to get 2 in the numerator and 15 by 5 to get 3 in the denominator. So that is the simplest form, 2/3. Equivalent fractions would be if they give me a fraction, for example 7 over 12, where I can't reduce it anymore, but I could choose to multiply both the top and bottom by the same amount. And if I multiplied by 2, I would get 14 in the numerator, and if I multiplied the denominator by 2, I would get 24. So 14 over 24 is equal to or equivalent to 7/12. Okay, let's look at example 2, identifying equivalent fractions. Tell whether the fractions 4 over 5 and 28 over 35 are equivalent. So are they equal? Well, 4/5 is in simplest form, so there's nothing we can do to that. But take a look at 28 over 35. You should know that 7 goes into both numbers. So let's divide the top and the bottom by 7. And that would give us, so 28 divided by 7 gives me 4. 35 divided by 7 gives me 5. So 28/35 can be reduced to 4/5. So 4/5 is the same as 4/5, and the fractions are equivalent. Take a look at example 3, writing equivalent fractions. So they want us to write two fractions that are equivalent to 8/12. Well, the first thing that we could do is reduce. I usually reduce first. So 8 over 12, I know that 4 goes into both numbers. So 8 divided by 4 would give me 2. 12 divided by 4 would give me 3. So my first answer would have been 2/3. The second thing I can do is just double both the numbers. I could multiply by the same amount. So 8 times 2 gives me 16. 12 times 2 gives me 24. So now I have two fractions that are equivalent to 8/12. Okay, so let's look at this example. Write two fractions that are equivalent to the given fraction. So take a look at number 4. They started us off with 7 over 21. Well, the first thing I would do is reduce. So I wrote 7 over 21, and then I divided both the numerator and denominator by 7. So 7 divided by 7 gives me 1. 21 divided by 7 gives me 3. So 1/3 is one of my answers. Now the other thing I would suggest you do is double both numbers. Multiply by 2. So 7 times 2 would give me 14. 21 times 2 gives me 42. So 14 over 42 is another fraction that's equivalent to 7 over 21. Take a look at number 5, 8 over 20. Well, the first thing I would do is reduce. So 8 divided by 4 gives me 2. 20 divided by 4 gives me 5. So 2/5 is an equivalent fraction. The next thing I would do is take the fraction and just double it. 8 times 2 is 16. 20 times 2 is 40. So 16 over 40 is my second fraction that's equivalent to 8/20. Take a look at number 6, 18 over 24. Well, first thing I do is I reduce. I see that 6 goes into both, so 18 divided by 6 gives me 3. 24 divided by 6 gives me 4. So 3/4 is one of my answers. Then I start with the original fraction and I double it. 18 times 2 gives me 36. 24 times 2 gives me 48. So 36 over 48 is another fraction that's equivalent. Take a look at number 7, 10 over 16. Well, the first thing I do is reduce, so I would divide both by 2. 10 divided by 2 is 5. 16 divided by 2 is 8, so 5/8 is one of my answers. And then I take the original fraction and I double it. 10 times 2 is 20. 16 times 2 is 32, so 20 over 32 would work. Okay, now let's do some algebra. So we're going to simplify and evaluate an expression. They want us to simplify negative 18x over 9x to the third power. And then we're going to evaluate it when x equals 2. Okay, the first thing I want you to do is take any expression they give you and write it out in expanded form. Now, take a look at that negative 18. The way that you can break it apart is use a prime factor tree. But you have to watch out for that negative. See that negative in front? Take a look in the margin. If I had negative 18, the first thing we always do with a negative is we take the negative 1 out. So it's negative 1 times 18. And then just keep going. Break apart 18 to 9 times 2, and break apart the 9 to 3 times 3. So when I wrote it out, you'll notice I had negative 1 times 2 times 3 times 3 times x. And I used the tree to help me. Now with 9, I know how to break that apart into prime factors. 9 is just 3 times 3, and then I wrote x to the third power as x times x times x. Now we rewrote it here, but just so I can show you. Anything that matches in the top and the bottom will be crossed out. So the 3 matched with the 3, so we crossed it out and made it a 1. Because remember, 3 divided by 3 is just 1. Then I saw another 3 that matched in the top and the bottom, so I crossed it out, and those would just become 1s. And then I even saw an x that matched in the top and the bottom, so I crossed those out, and those would become 1s. And so then you just write what you're left with. Negative 1 times 2 on top gave us negative 2, and then x times x on the bottom, I just brought it down here. So I'd have negative 2 over, and then we had to plug in the value for x. It's up here. They wanted x to be positive 2. So I substituted in a positive 2. And so we got negative 2 on top over 2 times 2 is 4. And then I just reduced. I divided the top and the bottom by 2. So negative 2 divided by 2 gave us negative 1. And 4 divided by 2 would give me positive 2. Okay, so let's practice this. The first thing we're going to do is simplify. That means write it out and cross out what matches. The second thing we're going to do is evaluate when a equals 2 and b equals negative 3. So take a look at number 8 here, 12b on top. So I broke apart the 12 to 2 times 2 times 3 times the b that was up there. And then in the denominator, in the bottom, I wrote 3 times a times b. Now notice the 3 matched, so I crossed it out, and the b's matched, so I crossed them out. So I'm left with 2 times 2 on top, which is 4, and the a on the bottom. So my answer, my simplified answer, my algebra answer, is 4 over a. Then I plugged in for a the positive 2. So I put 4 over a, and I plugged in the value, so 4 over 2. Well, 4 divided by 2 is just 2. So remember, there's going to be 2 answers for these. There's the algebra answer when we simplify, and then there's a number answer when we plug in the values. Take a look at number 9. 35a squared b on top. So 35 can be written as 5 times 7 times a times b. And then 5b on the bottom. I just brought down the 5b. Then I struck out anything that matches. So the 5's matched, so I crossed them out, and the b's matched, so I crossed them out. So I was left with 7 times a on the top. Well, we could just write that as 7a to the second power. And then I plugged in the value they wanted me to evaluate when a equals 2. So I showed you here 7 times 2 to the second power. We have to do the exponents first. 2 times 2 gave me 4, and then 4 times 7 gives us 28. Take a look at number 10. 2b to the fourth power over 18b. Well, I wrote 2 times b times b times b times b over 2 times 3 times 3 times b. And then I crossed out what matched, and that left me with b to the third power over 9. And then I showed you here, when we plug in a negative number, remember, put it in parentheses. So it's negative 3 to the third power over 9. I wrote out negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3 over 9. Well, negative 3 times negative 3 makes a positive 9. So I struck the 9 and the 9 out, so I was just left with negative 3. Take a look at number 11 here. Negative 24ab over 4b to the second power. Remember, that negative is really important. You saw me put it right here. That negative becomes that giant -1. And then I wrote out 24 is 2 times 2 times 2 times 3. And then I wrote out AB. And on the bottom, 4 becomes 2 times 2, and b squared becomes b times b. Then I struck out everything that matched, strike it out, and then I was left with -6a over b. And then down here I evaluated, so that gave me -6 times 2 over -3. Well, -6 times 2 is -12 over -3. -12 divided by -3 gives us +4.